When Susan and I were talking a little bit about planning for worship for today, I told her, I said, this is the text. Jesus is lost in the temple, 12 years old. She was like, you've got to be kidding. When I pulled up in the parking lot this morning, honestly, I looked at the back of the building and I thought, I was just here. We just had Christmas. It hadn't been a real 48 hours yet. And then I thought about it. That's kind of how Christmas is for a lot of us. I don't know. Perhaps some of you have already got the tree out at the curb or off and down ornaments. I haven't. I finally get mine finished getting put up. I'm a little bit slow sometimes. But there's sometimes it's just like it moves on. It's done. And so, there's part of the beauty of Methodism is that we're not required to read the lectionary text every Sunday. In the Episcopal Church, the priests are required to read the lectionary text. It's a chargeable offense. It's part of the reason I'm Methodist. There are a whole lot of reasons I'm Methodist, but that's one of them. If the Spirit says move and you got to go, and it works. It works for them, and I'm glad I don't have to do it. But I think part of, for me, today's text is important. Because there's a lot of us that Christmas is a one-day time. The 12 days of Christmas is not the song that gets stuck in your head, thank you, now that I've brought it up. And it's not that song that gets stuck in your head and has a little meaning. All that is connected to the 12 days between Christmas Day and January the 6th for the Epiphany, when the wise men show up, those time and seasons. It was used as one of those teaching tools in the early church. The partridge in a pear tree is Jesus the Christ. Two, I can't remember what those are. Two calling birds in the Old Testament and the New Testament, or four calling birds. Two gold rings. No, anyway, I can't do that. But they all have meaning. Google it and you'll find it yourself. But there are 12 days of Christmas. And so it's important for us to honor those and to feel those and to hear those. But it's important for us because we won't have this opportunity again to think back about Jesus and growing up. There's probably a sense of Mary and Joseph as new parents beginning to wonder what in the world life is going to be like with these angels and these shepherds showing up in the manger on Christmas. I don't know. I doubt they thought that in 12 years that they would lose Jesus for 3 days. That would be disconcerting. How would you leave town? I go back through the house 16 times to make sure I have everything to go on vacation. Sometimes I drive a block away and I turn around and I go back just to make sure the doors are locked again. That's just how I am. I'm ready to go. But Mary and Joseph, I think they traveled in large groups and they would kind of do these pilgrimage kind of things. So Jesus, they must have been assuming that he had made a friend and was hanging out with the other friend and their family. You know how that goes. Then they suddenly realized that they couldn't find him. So they hurriedly went back to try to look for him. It took them 3 days. And then they get into it because Jesus is in the temple. If you lose a kid, it's not a bad place to lose a kid. At church. People there that are supposed to take care of them and look after them, care for them. That's the goal. That's the idea. It's part of what it means to be in the family of God. I remember growing up, the time I got lost from my granddad at the Sears. We were over there. We would go kind of fairly regularly and wander around. Grandpa needed to pick up a random piece of tool or something he needed while we were over at the mall on a Saturday night. We'd go about every week. And so I kind of snuck off and I would do my own thing and he was kind of doing his own thing, thinking about something. And so I think there must have been an aisle or two between us. Well, I started trying to look for Grandpa. And Grandpa started looking for me. And so when we would go around the aisle, it was like a cartoon characters trying to find each other. And so it went back and forth. And I think finally I hollered out, "Grandpa," and he said, "Stand still." So I did. And I remember still to this day him looking at me and say, "If you get lost, stay still. Don't keep moving." I don't know, perhaps that's not a bad thing to think in life. When we don't really know what to do and which way to turn and how to act or how to move or what to do in a decision, what would be a really good thing to do is just to be still. And to wait, to hope, to pray to God, to listen for what God says. Oftentimes, we're so busy going about and doing what we need to do, we don't give God a chance to answer what we've asked for in prayer. We're like, "I got this." I think that's one of the most detriments of the American idealism and individualism to the life of faith, is the very spirit of, "You can do this. You can do anything. Anybody can grow up to be president." And yet, at the same time, we don't stop and say, "Whoa, slow down. Wait just a minute. Let's listen. What is it that your heart's desiring that you do? How do you serve one another? Are you a productive member of our society and culture? How does your faith speak to you and shape how you move and how you interact with one another?" You know, living out faith is not just Sunday morning, 11 to 12 a.m. or 12 p.m. You know, it's this ingrowing and it's this taking in, this quietness of life, listening for where God's calling us to go and to do. Jesus was in the temple, and the interaction, can you imagine that? These religious leaders of the day and these 12-year-old kid talking one to another. You know, there are times in life in which you realize that you're not the expert in the room on a situation. There are times in which you probably know more than anything else. One of my preacher friends always said, he said, when I was talking to him, I said, when early on starting out preaching, I was like, "Well, I'm a little nervous." And he said, "Well, you should be." And I said, "Well, there are people in the pews that have been walking the life of faith longer than I've been alive. 2 and 3 and 4 times over." And he was like, "Yeah, that's true." He said, "But how much have they thought about the text that you're talking about this morning? How much have they studied or read on it?" So today, at least for a little while, you're the expert in the field. You know what you're talking about better than anybody else in the room on this one. Maybe short-lived, but on this time, at this point, you know more. But this banter between a 12-year-old kid and a preacher, a trained teacher in the temple, just to be able to live into that experience. There are times in which we talk with preachers coming through the district committee on ministry, and there's some of them that have done their homework. Lots of life experiences and a lot of expertise and a lot of knowledge. You know, I'm jealous of those people that if they hear something, it just sticks in there like a sponge. And then I'm trying to read up on it, and if it's been 2 weeks since I looked at it, I've got to look at the book again to figure out how to do it. I just don't get that. That's that whole computer and technology stuff. It does not stick in my brain. But sometimes in those district committees, we get those people that are on point. And they know they are. And so it's kind of this little bit of challenge, and it's fun for me, too, to figure out which questions and how to. And those when you can really become, really get into a theological banter with them. And they don't get tripped up. They don't get upset. They know what they're talking about. They know what it is. I can imagine that that's what's happening in Jesus' day in the temple. I mean, it's solid, good, fun. I mean, it's more interesting than the closest football game or basketball game that's televised or you're in there in person. I mean, this stuff is good. Mary and Joseph run in, I'm sure, probably through the front door, and they see Jesus down there with these bunch of teachers. Mary goes into mama mode. Oh, why have you done this to us? Why have you left us? And wound up in the temple. We were worried to death about you. That happens. But Mary, that's pretty bold to be fussing at the very Son of God. She knew what she was getting into by this point, surely. And yet that's what she did. I think she went into mama mode. She was just worried about him. But Jesus was on a different plane. He knew where he was. I'm in my Father's house. Why didn't you even think about looking? Well, this is Joseph looked around. I'm like, that ain't my house. And yet it begins to be unfolding of who Jesus is. That's what it's trying to do. That's what the gospel is trying to do. It's trying to remind us and to tell us and to show us who Jesus is in the life of faith. That's part of why this text is in there. Jesus, too, was fully human. And his mama fussed at him a little bit. I mean, he was really human. And yet our understanding is he's the very Son of God as well. Oh, wow. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. So maybe that's why we need to hear this text. That Jesus was a normal kid, and yet at the same time saw things from a different perspective already. I don't know. I keep thinking about Christmas. I mean, we're in the season of Christmas only, really on the second day of Christmas. What does it mean? There is a part of Christmas that it can go away, like the Christmas trees. You know, it's fine if it comes down and gets thrown out to the curb. I said we would have gotten rid of the Advent wreath, but I knew that it will drag needles from here to the other side of the country. And so I left it in place. Don't touch it. It'll fall apart. That's okay. Part of what we do with Christmas, part of what we understand is we begin to put stuff away. We begin to pack stuff away till next year. But the important part of Christmas is that it is a spirit. I'll do this some point, usually about January the 5th. I'll wish somebody a Merry Christmas in a store. They'll look at me like I've got 4 eyes and a horn. They're like, I don't get what you talking about. I'm like, Christmas is the whole season. It's just a little reminder that I do sometimes. But part of what Christmas is that spirit of Christmas that resides in our hearts and in our lives and in our world. It doesn't matter if the Christmas tree's out or up in the attic or on the curb. Lights are on or off. Advent wreaths, candles are going. If there's a whole lot of leftovers in the refrigerator, or not many that are any good. Christmas is about a change in the way of life and the way we understand things. Thurgood Marshall had it put it this way, and this is floating around this time again, and I've heard it over and over the years, and I just want to share it with you. The mood of Christmas: when the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among people, to make music in the heart. That sums it up in much kinder and wonderful words than I would ever come up with. But it does. I think it communicates what I'm trying to say. It's just that we begin to take these teachings of Jesus and to move them into our hearts and in our lives and in our world in an effort to make a difference for God and God's kingdom. All glory, honor, and power be to the one who was, who is, and who is to come. Amen.